It is a battle in which the bitterest foes of a past will stand together and the closest of old alliances be destroyed.
In their pathetic, unacademic attempts to acclimate Europeans to their cultural dispossession, liberal regimes and their pseudo-scientists are pushing for an alternative history for European peoples, one that removes them from their own cultural and racial heritage, and thereby quickening their acceptance that they do not, nor have they ever, belonged to Europe. A basic scientific analysis of the pigmentation SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, for Cheddar Man, illustrate that these liberal scientists overplayed their hand, and that there was a reason why they went to the media before publishing anything, for they knew that their predictions would not stand their ground on a scientific peer-reviewed basis. Firstly, they only sequenced 33 of the SNPs out of the 36, many of which were not in the assay. This is highly suspicious. Instead of using something that could be verified by a third party, they used some obscure source that no other person could. Nonetheless, Cheddar Man was derived for markers in the IRF4 gene, which to this day appears to have a greater frequency in Irish people compared to other Northern Europeans, and also had a mutation in the MC1R gene which contributes to red hair. That's what the data that they released shows. One should mention that having the ancestral variant at the SLC45A2 and the SLC24A5 genes does not contribute to dark skin pigmentation, namely because those two mutations explain about 30% of the variation observed between the darkest and lightest skin tones. In layman's terms, this means you can be ancestral for those two and yet have a skin tone that is 70% lighter than the darkest skin tones and 30% darker than the lightest skin tone. Further, there have been many tested remains of the U haplotype Western hunter-gatherers from all over Europe from the first migrants some 45,000 years ago till Cheddar Man, and every single one of them has had the blue eye gene. So, why has none of these research groups found the ancestral variant of SLC24A5, or HERC2, or OCA2 for that matter, which are all a part of that detection process until now? Secondly, there are various East African groups that carry the non-African variant SLC24A5 too from back migrations, and they are very dark-skinned indeed. Thirdly, the L3 East African groups that produce the out-of-Africa exit theory in the first place do not carry the ancestral dark-skin variant of SLC24A5, but the variant carried by the oldest genetic group, the Khoi in South Africa, and they are also not very dark-skinned. Are these researchers suggesting that those very dark-skinned variants arose in the M and N haplogroups in the Middle East and not in their East African parent group? This is utter bullshit. We all accept that early U haplogroup Europeans would have been slightly darker skinned than today, but why have they depicted them so much darker than 40% of all contemporary Africans? Another factor oddly not being discussed is the reliability of this previously untested scientific process. Considering previous attempts to harvest DNA from other skeletal remains of the same era have always led to failure. It's strange that the overall scientific community would accept this result with anything short of reasonable skepticism. DNA, after all, has a well-documented half-life of just 521 years. As the bones in question are at a minimum 9,000 years old, this should have left the workable DNA to be around only 0.0007%. Further calling into question the scientific accuracy of this so-called discovery. Placing these two arguments together, there is a mathematical certainty that the findings of the Cheddar Man discovery is less than 1% probable, and one does not need a PhD to know what this suggests.